Hello everyone, Ailuromage the Magic History Cat here. Today I want to talk about the Final Fantasy XIV Alliance raid, Thaleia, specifically our battle with Thaliak, the Scholar and God of Wisdom of the 12. Thaliak is my favorite member of the 12 and I absolutely love this fight, so we're going to take a closer look at his attacks and abilities and their ties to Greek words and terms and the meaning behind them. So let's get right into it. Thaliak starts off with Cataractes. This is a room-wide AoE that applies a bleeding over time effect. The word cataractes in Greek can be used to indicate rushing down or striking down, but it's used to refer to a waterfall. This is where we get the word cataract, and kata is the part that can be used to express downwards, towards, into, and so on, depending on how it is used. We actually use quite a few words from this as English speakers, words such as catastrophe, catalyst, catacomb, and so on. So, for example, catapult is kata and palo means to hurl or to toss. Next is reagnosis. Thaliak creates a clone of himself and stirs up the water, forcing a massive wave over the arena and pushing everyone back. So, Gnosis means knowledge. I briefly talked about it in my video on the Sage abilities, as this word appears a few times in their moveset. Rio means flow or stream of, so reagnosis altogether is like saying a flow of knowledge or a stream of knowledge in English. And that's exactly what's happening here. Thaliak within the 12 is the Scholar and the God of Wisdom. With the help of Nemea, Thaliak created the River of Knowledge, pouring it forth from his ewer. That statue in Old Charleon is depicting this, and the Ewer card wielded by the Astrologian represents Thaliak and Nemea, who dwell within the Heaven of Water. So when we face Thaliak, we are facing him in the Heaven of Water, and we are fighting him on his River of Knowledge. So Thaliak is literally hitting us with the River of Knowledge. Next is Thlipsis, which is a standard stack mechanic for the raid. Now this particular word is interesting because my first exposure to this was in a religious context, like most Greek words for me because of my primary studies. In a biblical sense, it's talking about sadness or suffering. However, at its root, it refers more so to pressure or compression, and I assume this is probably the proper context for the raid, as if we are under incredible water pressure in the mechanic, or it could be referring to the party itself being pressured or compressed together. For Hydroptysis, Thaliak marks random players and drops water onto them. For this, hydro is just water, and this word has made its way into daily English in several ways, such as when we talk about hydropower or hydroplanes and things like that. So ptosis means falling or dropped. So it's like saying falling or dropped water. So rain, I guess, but in any case, it does match the attack as Thaliak drops water onto the players for the mechanic. Raiton is a line tank buster, firing a jet of water through the 3 tanks, so this can clip healers or DPS as well if they're too close. Now this is another word that is pretty much unchanged for us as English speakers because we're just referring to a Raiton, which is a decorative object meant to hold and pour liquid with a large opening on the top and a smaller opening on the bottom. Used for drinking, but it was used a lot for ceremonial purposes. So Raiton in the sense of the game is both water flowing from Thaliak into the tanks, but it's also a reference to Thaliak's ewer from which he pours the river. Now I'm going to set aside Teractus and Teractuous Cosmos for the end, so let's move on to Reagnosis Petrine. Now I've also heard this pronounced as Petrine, mostly when referring to the Petrine epistles, because this is specifically referring to Peter from the Bible, so I'm not sure what the ultimate true pronunciation for this is, but as a Westerner, I'm going to lean on the side of Petrine because I think the mechanic is implying that we are getting striked with rocks or boulders, because both Peter and Petrine come from Petra, which means rock or stone. That beautiful landmark in Jordan, it is basically called rock. But to be more accurate here, Petra isn't just this particular cliff face. Petra was an entire city believed to be as old as 5th century BC, and it is sometimes referred to as the Rose City today because of the beautiful color of the stone. The city itself actually contains a lot of what we would call Hellenistic architecture, basically meaning Greek, as the design of this city is full of Greek culture. In fact, if you look at these two figures on the bottom of that iconic cliff face, these horse riders are Castor and Pollux, Greek twin gods favored by sailors and travelers as patrons to help guide them on their journeys. Additionally, many historians are confident that this city used to be called Sela. I personally was aware of this because it is actually mentioned in the Bible, but to bring up a secular reference for this, there are Egyptian records that refer to it by the same name. And speaking of Egyptian record keeping, next is Hieroglyphica, where Thaliak performs a stage rotation and the party has to position themselves to remain in a safe tile space. So this is literally referring to hieroglyphics, which I'm sure most people are familiar with, one of the most intriguing forms of record keeping from the ancient world, still being studied to this day. One thing to mention though is that hieroglyphs were not used everywhere all the time for communication. There was a completely different writing system for daily use among the common folk of ancient Egypt. Hieroglyphs were considered to be the language of the gods, so the people using them were in positions such as scribes and temple priests. In fact, some Egyptologists are certain that many people, even at the time, probably didn't know how to read them because they were not educated in them, in the same way that many common folk in Western Europe were not educated to read and write in Latin, which is what was used in the Roman Catholic Church, so it had to be interpreted by priests. Now, if it seems strange or out of place to have a bridge to Egyptian ties or terms in Thaliak's moveset, it's very important to remember that Egypt and Greece have a lot of history together. The original Library of Alexandria was built on Egyptian land and came to be throughout the rule of Ptolemy I and II. There's a lot of specifics over the exact moments of planning, construction, and completion, and everything that is involved with a structure like this, so that's why I just mentioned them both together, because it was during this overall time period that the library came to be. If we look at the Rosetta Stone, which is the artifact discovered right before the turn of the 19th century, it opened the door for us today to understand hieroglyphs. Simply put, the stone has a decree written in hieroglyphic script, Demotic script, which is basically that simpler everyday writing that was used in Egypt, and ancient Greek. So the discovery of this is what broke new ground in finally understanding hieroglyphic script. Now, the Rosetta Stone itself is a damaged fragment of something larger, as parts of the writing appear unfinished due to the damage done to it, which is such a shame, and it hurts to know that we may never have the complete artifact, but it does tell us that these languages were all being used within the same time period together. So Thaliak, basically being an ancient Greek scholar, would probably know his way around hieroglyphs. And another fun fact is that during the mechanic right before the platform rotates and routes the players, you are marked with a condition called inscribed, as if Thaliak is inscribing you into the stone. And now we move on to the last one. Tetractys. This is where Thaliak shifts the entire stage into a triangle shape and begins a sequence of mechanics or redodged shapes and patterns he projects onto the stage. So the tetractys or tetrad is a triangular model attributed to Pythagoras and Pythagoreanism, which first emerged around 6th century BC. Now everyone probably recognizes this name from the Pythagorean theorem we were all forced to learn in high school that I have never used ever for anything ever, but for those of you who are mathematicians, I'm sure this pops up in your field quite often, and this specific topic has a lot of crossover with your field. I am not a mathematician myself, but I can explain this from a historical and philosophical side. The tetractys holds a lot of depth and meaning. The number 4 is very prominent in Greek philosophy, such as the 4 virtues, the 4 fluids, the 4 elements, and so on. So this model conveys many concepts together, rooted in creation and higher meaning, with 4 rows and 10 points forming the triangle. Now, Pythagoreanism was more than just a concept, it was an actual belief system centered around the tetractys. The first row is associated with unity in creation, the point from which all things are. The second row, the 2 points forming a connection or line by which there is power through motion or force between two things. The third row, the 3 points necessary to form a triangle as a two-dimensional object, signifying harmony and balance. And the fourth row are the 4 points necessary to form a three-dimensional object and can signify the greater universe, the cosmos. 4 numbers represent the 4 elements that the ancient Greeks believed were the source of everything: fire, water, earth, and air. And it can also relate to the other groups of 4 that I mentioned previously. And all of these points together make 10. Theka, and 10 is the number of perfection. I am just barely scratching the surface here. Altogether, it is the organization of space and the framework for the laws of the universe. It holds the secrets to the cosmos, the divine, and how to achieve higher wisdom by understanding the very structure of the universe by using it as a foundation. The Tetractys model also gets into very deep mathematical expressions where the various points and rows create different formulas or ratios as a means to explore the deeper meanings of universal law. I am no mathematician again, so I can't really speak confidently on this specific aspect, but the Tetractys has been paralleled to Pascal's triangle in terms of its sequential and algorithmic nature. And as a fun side note, if you look at the background during the sequence in the game, you will notice dozens of what look like mathematical formulas flowing around you. If you are a mathematician, feel free to weigh in on your thoughts here, and let me know if these are even real formulas floating around or if they're just for show. I'd love to know. All in all, this one model is one of the deepest philosophical rabbit holes, and there are several lifetimes of information and theories surrounding it if you really want to dig in deeper. Getting back to the game though, now you can see that Thaliak transforms the stage into a Tetractys, with 9 triangles that make up the floor for the mechanics. And then for Tetractys Cosmos, Thaliak spawns a 3-dimensional triangular shape instead of the previous flat patterns on the floor, referencing how that 4th row of the Tetractys represents the cosmos and 3-dimensional objects. It then of course collapses into a tri-shaped pattern that you dodge. That was a closer look at Thaliak's battle in Thaleia. I want to thank you all very much for watching, and I hope this was fun or informative in some way. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like or telling me what you thought, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thank you, and remember to pet a cat today.